Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Veronika Jolie on the podcast. She has a company called Savage Life, which I think, first of all, everyone should go and check out. I'll leave a link to it down below. But she's a bodybuilder as well as an online coach and a certified personal trainer. Coming to us all the way from Indiana, where, hopefully the weather is just a tad bit better than it is here, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But most importantly, she is our current guest. Veronika, thank you so much for coming on.
Heck yeah, it's such a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here, be a part of this. When you reached out to me, I was like, heck yeah, like I'm totally ready to freaking talk about my story and everything that I do and my passion about this. I mean, I'm very passionate about bodybuilding, health and fitness, and being a personal trainer, I'm very passionate, obviously, about changing other people's lives as well.
And that's awesome. And before we get into that, I always ask this first off because I love to torture myself. What is the weather like in Indiana today?
Oh my God, it's cold, and when I mean cold, it's like we're not breaking 32 degrees today.
Yeah, that's what it's like here. I'm not even gonna get the exact temperature because I feel too embarrassed. But yeah, it's not a sight to see here in Minnesota. But hey, we're in that time of the year where hey, this is the time of year that you can actually bulk and put on your 10 pounds of winter weight because that's just. I've done it a little bit early due to coronavirus, but that's a topic that we'll be discussing in a little bit. But before we get into that, because I don't want to depress everyone with our winter woes, why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and motivated you to get in shape, and how that led to you being a coach and a bodybuilder?
All right, so it's quite actually a long story.
Take as much time as you want.
Okay. So, first off, when I was growing up as a kid, even my mom is still to this day a fitness instructor. So I've been involved and around fitness since I was born, basically. And she was actually my very first inspiration too, because I saw how many people's lives she changed over the course of time, and how many people she just touched just because of her positive outlook. And people would always like admire her for her hard work, her body. She looks to this day looks amazing. So that alone, like I remember as a kid, I was like, yeah, like my mom is my hero. I love that. And so, as a child too, I was a total athlete. I was really into dance, as well as even ballet, everything. Like I've done a little bit of everything. I did karate, and I actually was an equestrian for 15 years. And I used to compete horses during that time, train, sell them, everything like that. So did that whole thing. And I kind of at the time when I was into the equestrian thing, kind of strayed away from the gym life. But then I realized, I'm like, how am I going to become a stronger athlete riding these horses? Because everyone in that realm thinks, oh, you just sit there and the horse does all the work, and it's not like that at all. So I was like, I got to start really getting back into working out again. I started picking at my mom a little bit, like, hey, like, teach me the ropes. I want to know what I need to do to get stronger so that I can control 1,200-pound animals essentially better, and do better in shows and training, all that. So I really got into it, I want to say back again when I was like 14 or 15. And um, I noticed that my riding got astronomically better. But not only that, I started to see more results even then. And I was like, I really dig this. I really like this. At the time, like a couple years later, I started getting into modeling actually too. And I was like, yeah, I need to definitely, stay up with my fitness. So it kept going on from there. But when I hit actually like 18 or 19 years old, believe it or not, I went through a pretty bad eating disorder too, where I legit was starving because I saw all these models thinking, oh, I got to be really, really skinny. That's the only way I'm going to get into a modeling agency. So it's time to get really skinny. What do? I ended up working out for 6 hours a day and eating like 600 calories only a day. And it was bad. I got really skinny. For the record, I'm 5'9" right now and I weigh about 177, 180 right now. And I'm sitting at about probably like 15% body fat right now. So being 5'9", I weighed 125 pounds. So I looked like just skin and bone, had no muscle. And, 2 years into that, so right around like, I want to say 20 years old is when I like woke up one day, I kid you not. I looked in the mirror and I was like, Veronika, what in the actual are you doing to yourself? You are killing yourself. Is this really what you think is right for you? Do you really want to live your life like this and be miserable every day? And granted, the boyfriend I had at the time, he was a saint because I was not a nice person when I was going through all that. Like, legit, not a nice person. So, what happened was I started to do more research on nutrition at the time. I even enrolled in my college at the time into a couple nutrition classes just to gather more information. And that's when I started to meet new people at the gym too. Because granted, I wasn't going to stop going to the gym. I just lessened my time. I wasn't going to spend 6 hours working out. That's pointless. So, I did notice at first, like, body fat started to really pack on, and I was like, "Oh, crap," like, it's my fault, though, I did destroy my metabolism, and it's a part of, recovery, it's a part of, completely, recomping your body sometimes is to gain that fat, and eventually it does come off as long as you're being consistent with diet and training. So, long story short, I met up with one of these guys that I still know, still friends with, and he actually took me to my very first Fit Expo. It was in San Jose, California, because that's originally where I'm from. I'll get back to that too. So, San Jose, California. It was at this time, 2014. I remember going to this expo and just absolutely amazed by all these athletes, these bodybuilders, competitive or just fitness influencers, whoever they were. They were just all beautiful people, like inside and out. Like their stories really touched me too. And that alone motivated me to take it to the next level. I was like, you know what? Like if these people can do it, there's no reason why I can't. Like, I could take it to the next level. So that's when I really started to gauge my fitness and well being more into bodybuilding and having more structure and getting into the workouts. And then I want to say 2015 is when I've hired my first coach actually to take it to the next level. And my goal in the very beginning was to actually do bikini. Like I had no desire to be as big as I am now, which is hilarious. But like I had no desire. I was like, no, like I just want to be one of those really, really pretty bikini girls and strut my stuff and feel good, look good. That's my goal. Well, then what happened was, I was in bikini prep and everything like that, but I will say that putting on muscle was extremely inspiring for myself too, and it motivated me. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I feel really beautiful and sexy having muscle. So I'm like, whatever. I'm gonna get through this prep, and then maybe I'll go up in the levels eventually. So I went through a prep. I actually didn't end up competing because I want to say, like, it just I started to feel like, bikini really isn't my thing. I want more muscle. Screw this. Like, why not? Why am I even doing this? And I voiced that to my coach. I was like, I need to take a break. I really want to focus on putting more size on. I think that that's gonna be more of my realm because I absolutely love it. I'm not really digging being this thin. I really don't want to, which is crazy because again, if you look a couple years back, I'd have been like, oh, right on, yeah, let's get skinny. So I took about a year and a half off of just really dialing in, lifting more weights, um, really just focusing on my goal. And one of the athletes that actually really inspired me too at the time was DLB, Dana Lynn Bailey. Just because, like, I always thought, my God, she has the most beautiful physique. She has a beautiful back. I want to be like her one day. I don't know if I'd ever be able to get as big. Like that's what I kept thinking to myself. I don't know if I'll be able to get as big, but I do. That's goals. Like she's goals. That's where I want to be. And so I kept going. I actually did another prep a couple years later for figure because I was like, okay, like I've definitely put more size on. I feel really, really good. Well, I went with the same coach, and granted, I played around with different coaches in between too. Just I wanted to learn a little bit of everything from everybody because everyone has a little bit of a different method. And it's like, one day if I want to be a coach too, but this is my thought process anyway back then. I want to be able to have a bunch of knowledge that I can share with others based upon what worked for me and what didn't work, or what I've seen work for others that may not work for everyone, kind of thing. So, anyway, so long story short, I got back to this coach again that did my original prep, and we got all the way to 9 weeks out, and nothing against him personally, but I think he took it a little bit too far with me in the sense that it got to the point where I looked and I'm like, yeah, I'm losing muscle at this point. And then I remember I got really sick. Um, it's really common to get sick with a cold while you're dieting hardcore like that. It's not uncommon. You're putting a lot of stress on your CNS. And definitely, if you're not taking immune support supplements, you're most likely gonna suffer. So that's exactly what happened to me. Is I was lacking sleep at the time, which sleep is number one of the biggest things that you should be doing in prep. And I ended up trying to tell him like, hey, look, like I'm sick right now. I'm gonna try my best to stick it out. But week 3 of being sick, I was like, okay, I'm not getting better. I think I need to go back to the drawing board, pull out. It just is not my time. I need to sleep. And he actually agreed with me completely this time around because he's like, you know what? If your sleep's not in order, it's pointless for you to even try to compete at this point. I'm like, you're right. I need to get my life a little bit more together. I need to figure out to balance work at the time and personal life and my bodybuilding because bodybuilding is a full-time job. That's where a lot of people don't understand is like, oh, well, you just lift weights and you prep food. It's way more than that. You are married to it is the best way to put it. Like it's your full-time commitment on top of your full-time job. You have to make sure you eat enough. If you skip meals, screw you. That's a big, big, big mistake. So so I just remember like at the time I was like, you know what, like I need to get everything in order like that. Well, because I got sick, I was actually sick. I ended up being sick for like a month and a half after that. So it took me time to get better and to like really get back into the gym again because a lot of people don't understand too is when you go into prep, you actually really screw with your hormones too. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you really screw up your hormones. And so to try to get them bounced back out, you are going to go through some depression. That's what a lot of competitors will tell you too when they get out of prep. They get post show blues, and that's a real thing. And you just have to work through it. Unfortunately, you don't just stop training. I know a lot of people that take rest, and which I suggest rest is very important after you compete. You need to let your body just recuperate for a second. But a lot of people, including myself, I ended up like not really working out for a month because I was like, man, like I'm just fried. I really can't do this, blah, blah, blah. But then I got back into it again and again. And then I actually had a coach. This is also back where I'm from in California. And she was like, girl, she's like, you have what it takes to do woman's physique. Like, you really do. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't have any of that size right now. So you can see me doing that. She's like, girl, you've got the legs for it, which I've always had big legs. She's like, just go for it. Let's just try. I'm like, okay. So then I started to take my training up a notch, and I had basically the spark and the fire was lit just like that. I was like, heck yeah, let's go for it. And so I've been in an off season now for a good couple of years, and I'm looking to compete next year. Um, Now what's funny is it's all about like I want to get bigger. I'm always like now I'm just like I want to get bigger. And again, like what I was mentioning earlier is like what's funny is me back when I started never wanted to look like what I look like now. But now looking back at that, I'm like, you know what? I could not see myself any other way. I am like absolutely freaking stoked to look the way that I do. And like I said, I want to just constantly get bigger. And my fiance is my coach now. He is hands down the most incredible coach I've ever had. Just I'm not being biased either. Like minus him even being my fiance, like and me marrying this guy, like I've seen him change a lot of people's lives too. He has like I want to say 30 clients right now, and he's doing like health and wellness coaching with them too. But he have a couple competitors. So me, one of our friends is a competitor. We're both trying to go for our pro cards next year, and so he's gonna be the one to take us there. And so I'm pretty stoked to see what happens. But honestly, like my words of advice is like, especially for women, is to just keep going. Like I have people in society that constantly are like, "Oh God, you're too big," this and that. I'm like, since when does your opinion even matter? Like I honestly don't care. Yeah, you can think whatever you want. Clearly, it just shows your own insecurities, and that's totally okay too. Like I really don't care. But back 5, 6 years ago, more like actually 7 or 8 now. 7 or 8 years ago, I would have really cared and been like, oh my God, I have to listen to what everybody tells me because this is so important what everyone thinks. No, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter what other people think. If you're happy doing what you're doing, you got to keep doing what you're doing. Seriously, life's too short.
And that is just such a great story. I mean, yeah, we have had a lot of people that have either had, like eating disorders or stuff like that happen. But you, believe it or not, you are not the first equestrian on this podcast either. You're probably more like the fifth or sixth because that seems to be one
Wow.
thing too, where a lot of people, yeah, one of the biggest myths is that, yeah, those people don't need to work out at all. It's just like with golf too, where people look at golfers and they're like, oh yeah, they never need to really work out. Now, if you're John Daly, that's a pass because, he's just naturally gifted. But one thing that I find fascinating about your story that whenever someone says that they work out for that long of a period of time when they were first going, like when you said you work out for 6 hours, what was a 6 hour workout like for you? Because the most I've ever done in a day is like 2.5 hours, and I like couldn't even walk the next day.
Oh, I kid you not. Like, first off, it consisted of at least an hour of cardio, like before and after my session. Like, it was just asinine. And then it literally considered, oh, I'm just gonna work out my whole entire body. And then like I was ridiculous. Like I'd work out like for so here we go. So structure. An hour cardio in the beginning, 2 hour workout, let's say. And then my mom was like training Pilates at the time. So I'm like, I'm gonna jump into one of her Pilates classes. Why not? So then I do Pilates for an hour and I'm like, oh, you say you have another class now? Okay, I'm gonna go do another one. And then like it was just obsessive. And even she was like, Veronika, you need to take a step back. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm all for you working out, obviously, but this is just too much, girl. Like, you need to take a step back and chill.
That's yeah, that's insane. I don't know how I honestly could honestly never do that, but yeah, that's just incredible. But a question that I ask every single guest that I have on this podcast, because if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there are 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. What was that journey like for you, sort of figuring out what works best for your body? Because if you were to walk up to someone and say, "Hey, what'd you train for that body part? It looks amazing," what works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you.
Right. And so it's just really honestly, like I'll say this about everything, it really is just trial and error. You're gonna have to try things in order to see if it works for you or not. Certain exercises that work phenomenal for me, for instance, don't necessarily work for my clients, and that's totally okay because for them, I'm just trying to figure out their bodies and try to figure out what is gonna work well for them. And I'll play around because I've done a bunch of different, training styles, different movements, all that kind of stuff. And so I'll like structure them a program and we'll follow it for I make them follow a program for a good month. Because it takes sometimes up to a month to really see changes. I mean, some people get really lucky and have changes within the first week. Again, it's just very different per body, but for the first month, I want to say is how I judge it. Like one of my clients, for instance, she's doing phenomenal. We started back in August, and I took over her nutrition only like a month and a half ago, and she's already down 13 pounds, and she looks great. She's put on muscle, she looks beautiful. But I want to say I've probably changed her workout program a good 3 or 4 times already. And it's just because it's based on how her body responds. Like the first month, yeah, her body was like, boop, responded really, really fast. And then she hit a plateau. So I'm like, okay, now it's time to switch things up. Whereas you're going to have another person, for instance, I have another client that we're doing this 3 day a week routine, full body routine, because for her, it has to do with her work schedule. She's a nurse practitioner, so she's extremely busy. Granted, we're going to change her schedule into 5 days here shortly because she's not only ready for just more like I want to say isolated work, rather than condensing everything into 3 days, she wants it more like isolated where you have a chest day, leg day. And I honestly even told her, honestly, in my opinion, I prefer that versus a 3 day a week full body thing, just because I think it's a lot more forgiving on the body and you have a lot better recovery time. But again, to each their own. It's going to be dependent on what works for anybody at that point. But yeah, honestly, when I started out, I will say that it was just a lot of trial and error. I picked trainers' minds all the time, my mom being one of them. And then coaches, of course. Coaches would give me their input on what I needed to play around with and try. And then I will say, too, ex boyfriends. I worked out with a lot of my ex boyfriends. A lot of my ex boyfriends were bodybuilders, too. Um, and then obviously now my fiance, he's freaking crazy. He has like a whole different type of style of training that I kid you not, you just look at him like you're crazy. Like what that looks too easy, but when you do it, you're like, oh crap, I'm dead.
Okay, no, so I have to ask then, what is his training technique? Because anything to make my workouts seem a little bit easier. What does he do that's so different from everyone else?
Oh man, like it's just like you could be doing something body weighted, for instance. For instance, we do one of our exercises for our leg day. Mind you, we do an outer sweep focus day and we do an inner sweep focus day for the quads. Both have some hamstring work on them too, so we're still targeting the posterior chain. But oh my god, for instance, we'll have a dumbbell, right? And we'll just do a sissy squat with this dumbbell, like put our heels up on it, and do it for reps. And he's like, now keep your knees together and you're gonna hit your like butt basically on the dumbbell and come back up, but nice and slow and controlled. And I looked at him like, dude, I have huge legs. I'm strong. You are crazy to think that I can't do this. Like, you are really undermining me. This is gonna be too easy. He's like, don't argue with me. Just try it. This is not Beyonce talking to you right now. This is coach talking to you right now. So I did that, and it's true. Like stuff, the simplest stuff like that, where you're just like, oh, like whatever. No, I was dead. I was like, oh, I'm not even sore the next day. And then all of a sudden, 2 hours later, I'm like, oh crap, I am so sore. And I'm not even going as heavy as I usually do. It's just the type of workouts he does. And people look at him funny all the time too because he'll be curling like, for instance, on an arm day, he'll be curling 10-pound like dumbbells, and people are like, "This, he's a huge guy." They're looking at him like, "What in the world are you doing?" They just give him such weird looks. I'm like, man, I'm like, honestly, if you look that good, that big, curling 10-pound dumbbells, you obviously know what you're doing. So
That's awesome. And it sort of brings me into my next topic that I love to discuss is genetics, because especially in this day and age with social media, everyone's, oh, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. People don't realize that you can only be the best version of yourself. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to shake people down and just be like, you do not know how that person got to the way that they look like that. You don't know their dedication. I mean, some people, let's be honest, are just genetic freaks where they're blessed, where you're just like, hey, you're lucky as hell. I mean, I've had guests on here that, I'm pretty sure that they were born with 12 packs. I can't
yeah.
confirm or deny it, but it's just absolutely ridiculous. But on top of that, whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off, that don't have to train as much. And they have that one body part that just drags behind it. They have to train to an insane amount to get it to catch up to everything else. What were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Oh my god. So my legs, hands down, have always been freaking huge. I've always had no problem growing those. But a lot of it, if you think about it as an equestrian, though, too, you're gonna have huge, huge, huge legs because again, like you're riding a horse, that's your main source of, you know, grabbing basically and hanging on. Cores being the next one. Like I have a very strong core, I always have. It's very easy just through diet alone for me to get a six pack. Hands down, super easy. Now, let me tell you this though. So upper body has always been the harder part. Like I'll did you know if you can go through my Instagram and you look at pictures, you can see on my journey too. And I post transformations all the time. I used to be more like really narrow up top and then I'd be really wide on the bottom. And it's been that way for so long until like the last couple of years where my back really took off and actually grew. And so did my arms and my chest has really grown. The one part of my body that I still have a huge conflict with is my shoulders. They take forever to grow. And I know it's a huge, huge issue for a lot of people too. A lot of people I've talked to are like, yeah, that's my weak point too. Um, but I mean, it's not like they haven't had any progress. They're just not as fast as the rest of my body, which could be super annoying, especially when it's like, oh my god, my arms are like up another like a quarter inch. This is really dope. Well, my shoulders look the exact same size though, so now they look really small compared to my arms.
Which, I mean, shoulders for women, I think that's the number one that we hear of all the time. But yeah, I was gonna say, just scrolling through your photos, I was like, oh, your arms are probably the number one thing that grew the most. That's the quickest thing to grow. But yeah, for me, I'm 6'3", so my lower body is just not gonna. It's a never ending quest of never gonna get any results. Calves, I always say, are the one thing I could inject pure muscle into my legs and calves, and they wouldn't gain an ounce. I mean, I'm just one of those weird people where I can train as much as I want, and they just won't grow. So yeah, and I love asking that because it just shows that everyone's different, and everyone else has different body parts that really take off. So. I mean, and unfortunately, that's the one thing about health and fitness is that you're never going to be able to look just like someone, and you don't know how much it's going to take. And especially people in our generation where everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday. This is not a lifestyle that you're going to get into and expect to see those results. But a myth that I love to bust in this podcast, and we talked about it briefly before we started recording. I mean, it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there are still so many women that have that fear that if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight, which, like I told you before, I'd spend my entire life savings to train with you once then, because you have found the secret that so many people are looking for. But did you ever have that fear when you're getting started? And even if you didn't, which I bet you probably didn't, how do you like to respond to that? Because I bet you hear that still all the time to this day.
So believe it or not, like when I was a kid, like back when I was like just starting out, like not even into bodybuilding yet. Slightly, yeah, that was my fear. I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna bulk up. My mom's all like, honey, you're never gonna bulk up. You're just gonna tone. I'm like, okay, cool. But then later on, like nowadays, like I have people like there are some, especially I'll say California is really ahead like with that. Like they've really a lot of them have gotten that understanding now, and it's so fitness is so saturated in that state. So it's like you won't hear that too often over there, to be honest with you, at least with the people I've talked to. But definitely in the Midwest, it's more fitness is way more up and coming, I feel like, in the Midwest compared to like places like the East Coast or West Coast. So I've heard it more frequently now than I have in a long time. And I tell people, I'm like, that's fun. That's really funny, actually. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, that doesn't happen. They're like, well, like, how did you get the way you look? I'm like, honestly, I'm like, because I've been training for 7 years, the same, like, and making it more intense. And I purposely wanted to get big and I eat the calories to get this big too. Like I'm at right now 3,300 calories a day. So I'm feeding myself to get this big, and I'm also training myself to get this big. I'm like, you can pick up a weight if you want to. Even like if you look at powerlifters too, I mean, let's be honest, if you look at a lot of powerlifters, They're not sculpted like we are. They're very strong though. They're very strong. So strength and aesthetics are very different. And that's where a lot of people get things mixed up too. So it's like that's what I tell girls too. I'm like, you can pick up the heaviest dumbbell right now, lift it a gazillion times, do that for months on end, and you're still not going to get super super huge like me. It's not going to happen unless you specifically train for it. And then you have other athletes, just being honest with you, just because it's a thing, that run steroids. And I'm like, a lot of these females that you see on social media that are huge, you're not going to get the way of picking up a dumbbell. That takes extra supplementation. It really does. So then it kind of puts them at ease, though. They're like, oh, okay. So you mean like, if I was to train with you, like I'm like, you're not gonna get that way. Now I'm like, if you really want to, I'm like, I can give you the diet and stuff like that, and we can go ahead and start, really packing on some muscle if that's really your goal. And but again, be prepared. It doesn't happen overnight. It does take a long time. I did not get this way until like 7 years. It took 7 years for me to get the way I look right now, and I'm still not satisfied. I'm always hungry for more. So
And you got to add a disclaimer at the end there and say, by the way, if this does happen to you, though, I will hire you as my personal trainer. Then, if
heck
that
yeah.
happens. But on top of that, I always say one thing that it really impacts women so much more than it does men when it comes to working out is that confidence boost that it gives you. I mean, we have heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of women who have made life changing decisions. They've either become a little bit more assertive, or it's just one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact every single aspect of your life. How have you personally taken that confidence boost that working out has given you and used it to impact your life in a positive way?
So it's actually made me a lot more successful is the best way to actually put it. And the reason why I say that is because so for instance, like right now for work, so I bartend up in Michigan, okay? I live in South Bend specifically, so I'm only like 15, 20 minutes away from Michigan. And I bartend over there, so it's like, hey, like I mean right now I'm not because the state's shut down over there. But that job requires me to be very outgoing and really on top of my A game. And I will say, having the muscles and overall just this fitness journey, it's really boosted my confidence to talk to anyone just about dang near everything, honestly. And so, the biggest thing that happens to me while I'm in a social environment too. Oh my God, you're so jacked. How'd you get that big? And so that's how our conversations always start, regardless of anything. And so I will say, like, the confidence that I've gotten from the gym that I can apply to life is just being more social with people. Back when I was a kid, I was very shy into myself, actually. I was really, really quiet. I would never be talking like this on a podcast. I'd be scared. No way, no way in hell would I ever be able to do anything. So, like, it's definitely given me that. It's given me the opportunity to really branch myself out too, as far as like being an entrepreneur, creating my own personal training business basically, and online coaching, all that. So it's overall really helped me just life, honestly. Because I will say, being insecure, that really doesn't get you anywhere.
Mhm. No, and yeah, that's a story that we've heard a lot as well. And yeah, I mean, it's just this sport is so much more of a benefit mentally than it is physically, and so many people don't understand that, or the lifestyle too, just because they always just notice the physical side effects and, oh my God, you look great, you look amazing, but they never ask, how are you mentally? But that's one thing that I think has impacted way more than that. But you did mention sleep, and that's one thing that I love to talk about because, it's the most underrated thing when it comes to anything really in life. But it's probably the most important thing when it comes to health and fitness. I don't care what anyone says. If anyone says that something is more important to that than that when it comes to health and fitness, I asked them the challenge of going one night without sleeping and then going and working out and then see how they do. So
Exactly.
yeah, so it's ridiculous. But how have you managed your sleep, especially since you've been on this journey and you've been training a lot? Because when you train a lot, and I'm aware of it as well. Sleep becomes ever more important than it does if you were just an average Joe out there. So how do you like to try to get that proper amount of sleep? Because especially when you're in prep too, like you're saying, your sleep is going to suffer no matter what, just because of how dieted down you are.
So honestly, it's just all about time management. It's like anything. You make time to go to the gym. Well, you need to make time to go to sleep. Now, I will say that I don't get as much sleep as I probably should. 7 hours is typically when I feel my best. And again, it's like a lot of research will tell you, oh, you need at least 8 hours of sleep. Well, honest to God, it's very different per individual too, though. Like, you have individuals that will run optimally at 5 hours of sleep. You'll have individuals that run optimally on 10 hours of sleep. It really just depends. For me, it's right at 7. I feel my best. If I sleep longer than 7 hours, I feel really groggy and I can't wake up. If I sleep under that, there's no way. And honestly, yeah, It's huge. Sleep is extremely important, because what really builds muscle is recovery, and that's where a lot of people don't understand that either. And a lot of people that are new to the gym life too, or fitness life, or not, they don't know. But that's the biggest thing. If you want to grow and if you want muscles and even if you want fat loss, sleep is going to be your number one thing. And it goes actually above training, which is why, like, I was mentioning to you earlier that, my dog was sick all night. He's better now. Culprit was he ate a sock and he threw it up, thankfully. But but granted, I only got like, I want to say like maybe 3 hours of sleep last night. So I didn't train yesterday just because shame on me, but I was behind a meal. So I was like, you know what? It's not even worth me working out today, because if I'm behind in food, then I'm shooting myself in the foot. Same thing goes with today. I'm actually just gonna go ahead and take another rest day. A lot of people be like, "Oh my gosh, just push through it." Actually, no. It's because if I try to go work out right now on 3 hours of sleep, there is no way I'm gonna have a good workout. I'm literally again shooting myself in the foot. So I might as well just rest and eat all my food and just have a great night and start fresh tomorrow in the gym.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better feeling in the world than after that proper amount of sleep, after a long workout where you wake up feeling like a superhero, basically. I mean, it's incredible. But I mean, on top of all this too, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, the coronavirus, because it's been one thing that's impacted all of our lives in more ways than we could ever have imagined. I mean, it's just incredible. But being that, I mean, you do work in you have two lines of work. I mean, being a bartender, that's a job that's been especially affected by this, and also being a personal trainer, that's one thing that's been impacted by this a lot. How have you been doing during this pandemic? What has this experience been like for you?
So right now, thankfully, Indiana's obviously not shut down again. Obviously Michigan is, Indiana has not, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we stay that way, but we'll see. But in the beginning of the year, when everything was basically shut down, I'm actually a licensed pharmacy tech too. So what I did was I do a little bit of everything. But what I did was I got a job over at a pharmacy in the meantime. I'm like, I got to make some kind of income right now, just something. It doesn't matter. At the time, again, I'm very thankful to my fiance Sean. He actually um, he has a lot of connections, and he was able to find gym equipment that we could put in our basement actually. And we slowly accumulated more and more equipment over that lockdown to where we were actually able to get creative and do our own workouts here. And I kid you not, the weirdest thing, like, just because it was a different style, I actually noticed more growth in my body, overall muscle, working out at home than I did at the gym, which was like, what the heck? Like, you would not expect that, but just because we were just training, we were doing our thing, we weren't gonna, stop. And I stayed actually really on top of my nutrition through the entire thing too. And when I got back in the gym, and I remember I took one of my first gym selfies, people were like, "What did you do?" I'm all like, "I just kept up, honestly. I didn't slack off. I mean, I could have. I really could have, but I was like, I'm not gonna let the situation take the best of me. It freaking wins if it does, and I'm not about to lose to a virus, honestly, at this point. So I went ahead and took matters into my own hands. Now our basement is really well set up for the most part. So for any reason our state does get shut down again, I am gonna take my trainers. I'm the trainer. I'm gonna take my clients um, in my basement and train them one at a time.
Which I mean, good for Indiana because we're shut down here in Minnesota until the 18th. So yeah, it's just an insane time that we're living in. But before even the pandemic, a question that I love to ask about nutrition is that, what were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made? Because every time I ask that to someone, I mean, their story is absolutely different. And it's one of those questions too, where it's got to be so individualized. But in your personal journey, what were some of the big nutritional changes that you made?
Like in before, like during like the pandemic, or like.
Before, we can do both. Then we can do when you started your journey, and then during the pandemic, because there were food shortages all the time. I mean, I had to get venison from a freaking neighbor to help with my meat. So, what were both those experiences like for you?
So I'll say that right now, like very beginning of my journey, my calories were not nearly obviously as high as now. This has taken a long time for my body to actually metabolize as many calories as it does now. I remember in the very beginning, like I considered like 2100 calories really, really high for me. And it's just because of the time, like, and to this day, I'm still slightly carb sensitive. I will say that, like, I can definitely do like a lot of fats. I mean, over time, yeah, my carbs, like, I'm not as carb sensitive, but I still slightly am. So I honestly, overall, will say that like my protein's always been generally like on the higher end. But again, everything takes time. So I started out, like I said, 2100 at my most. In preps, I got really, really low. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's necessary to get down to 1,400 calories a day, just being honest. I think there's ways around that, just from my experience and coaching others too. But I will say that, fast forward to now, like I'm able to, like I said, consume like 3,300 calories. My protein's really high. My fats are really high. My carbs are actually fairly high right now too. Overall, across the board, it's really high. But we've primed my metabolism to where it's able to, digest and utilize all that for the most part. And granted, we're trying to put a little bit more body fat percentage on me right now anyway, because I got down, it was like a couple months ago, I got down to as low as 12%. I wanted to see what I looked like, what everything started to look like. But obviously, as a female, that's not really healthy to maintain, like at all. So, I mean, yeah, when I compete, it's gonna be a lot lower than that. But again, for maintenance, I don't want to be at 12% just to, chill at. So we got me back up to about, I want to say 15, 16% is where I'm sitting now, which is still like for a female pretty low, but it's a lot healthier and I'm feeling a lot more energy now too. I will say we eat mainly a lot of red meat, believe it or not. That's our big thing. Actually, Sean and I followed the vertical diet for a long time too. And if you want to talk about really balancing your hormones out, that's probably one of the best diets to do that with too,
So what
honestly.
is the vertical diet? Because I've never heard of that, honestly.
No
No,
way, really?
no. Yeah.
Do you know who Stan Efferdine is?
It rings a bell, but not like nothing really pops up, but like something pops up. We're like, yeah, I've heard that name before.
Well, for one, you got to go follow him because he's phenomenal. But two, he's actually the one who created the vertical diet, and it's basically, long story short, because I can go into really, really big detail about it too. But it basically is just all, it's all whole foods. You're doing mainly red meat. You can do salmon as well, but it's mainly red meat. You're gonna do rice and eggs and specifically jasmine rice. It's not even brown rice. Specifically jasmine rice. You're gonna have bell peppers, you want oranges, you want no sugar cranberry juice, you want bone broth too. And then Greek yogurt is really good with it too, and then almonds. It's very basic, but it's like literally the best concoction. Oh, and then spinach too. Spinach is like your number one green that you want and all that. And so you can do like what he calls his monster mashes, where you literally take like beef and the rice and spinach and the eggs and bone broth and you mash it all together basically. It's actually very yummy. And actually, what's really great too, what we've learned is when you take white rice and you put broth over it and microwave it just like that, oh my God. It's protein rice essentially. It's freaking tasty. So, um, I think that's one of the best diets to follow. That really got my hormones in check big time, especially last year, like when I was going through some like hormonal imbalances. I mean, granted, I'm a female. Most females we do, but if you are also coming out of prep, you're also going to be, like I said, really messed up with your hormones too. So that's a really great diet to follow. But I also do know people that follow that through into a show too, and it's a great overall diet. In fact, I was actually telling Sean the other day that I think I want to get back into that just because I got a lot of muscle growth out of it too. Because the biggest myth too out there, I will say it now too, is, oh my God, stay away from red meat. And actually, no, keep eating red meat. Red meat is not the issue that a lot of people say. Like, oh, people will be like, oh, heart disease, cholesterol, this and that. It's actually not. Actually, if you really want to do your research and really dig deep, sugar is the biggest issue with all that. So I honestly will preach red meat, red meat, red meat all day, every day, all day long. Now, if you need to make adjustments based upon your needs when you're in prep, sure, chicken's fine. It's not like it's bad. But red meat all day long. There's a lot of nutrients in it that a lot of other meats don't have, and then of course salmon. Salmon's full of nutrients too. But I even like, dude, if you're trying to build muscle, like that is even a good diet for you to look into. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that does sound amazing. So I'm definitely going to have to go and look that up. And I'll leave the link for all that stuff down there for if anyone's really interested in that. But a question that I love asking personal trainers because, and I think it applies especially during this era that we're in the pandemic, is that, the number one excuse that I can guarantee you here is, oh, I just don't have the time. I just want to work out, but I just don't have the time. And it's like, first of all, we all have the same 24 hours in the day. I've gotten into this 100 times, so I'm not even going to go into it again. But honestly, we all do. But now if someone says that they don't have the time, I wanna know what their life is like because, I mean, everyone has more free time now, let's be completely honest. So, what's your best piece of advice for someone just to get started, especially in this day and age? Because, I mean, it's a whole different set of circumstances as opposed to, if someone were to come up to you a year ago and say, "Hey, I really wanna get in shape." So, what advice would you have? Because so many people wanna get in shape. I shouldn't even say so many, I'd say everyone wants to get in better shape, but it's just the vast majority of people lack the knowledge on how to do it. That's what's really keeping them back.
Right, and that's the thing is, like, I actually start my conversation always like that too, like, if someone says that to me that they don't have time, I'm like, "Well, look, I'll say we all have the same 24 hours in a day. It's about how you utilize it." And, I haven't had this is a fairly recent conversation I had with somebody. Like, she's a mom, she has 2 kids, she works all the time, and she just feels like she can't get in. And I'm like, "Why do you feel like you can't get your workouts in?" "Well, because, like, once I'm done with work, I gotta pick up my kids from my mom's." I'm like, "So you're saying to me that you can't tell your mom or somebody to watch your kids for even an extra 30 minutes is all you need just to get your body moving?" She's like, "Well, when you put it that way," I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "A workout doesn't need to be hours long, especially if your goal is just to get into shape or to stay in shape or just to be healthy. You don't need to work out for hours on end. You can literally I've actually had some of my best workouts in 20 minutes. Like, I just powered it out. That's all the time I had in the day, but I still did it. So that's my biggest piece of advice is, regardless of your situation, you just need to make the time. Even if, like I said, if it's 30 minutes of your day, good, cool. Like, do it right after you get off work. Do it right before work. Just do it sometime. Just fit it in. It doesn't matter how long. It's just about getting it done. Does not matter. And a lot of things when I told her that too, she's like, "Good point." And so then she started to go in the mornings, and then she started to realize, "Huh, well now, like, I'm able to actually go longer." I'm like, "Exactly." I'm like, You're just putting limits on yourself that you don't need to put limits on. You're already setting yourself up for failure and giving up before you've even started. So that's where you guys got to change the mindset and be like, "No, go get it done right now. You'll thank yourself later."
No, and that's honestly the one thing is that, you just got to get it done because I'm one of those people, I'm a procrastination king. So, I know every excuse in the book to make when it comes to, avoiding things. So, yeah, it's honestly just once you take that first step, just like a lot of things in life, it just becomes so much easier once that first step is done. But a question that I ask every guest because I did a poll right before New Year's last year, and it was what's one body part that everyone's looking forward to growing the most, and the answers were arms, abs, back, legs, shoulders, and like there's like 10 other things, but arms won by like a great majority. So now I got to ask most of the guests I have on, what does an arm day look like for you? Because being a guy, we basically communicate with our arms. So what do you do for your arms? Because I'm willing to take any advice.
Okay, so I'll be honest with you. I honestly only do like 4 exercises for my biceps and my triceps. They just are. It's an easy body part for me. They grow. So I honestly just superset the crap out of everything. Honestly, I'm going for high volume. I do use really good pump products too. I love using pump supplements. I enjoy drinking caffeine by all means. Like, I'm sipping on coffee right now as we're talking. But if you consume too much caffeine, I will say that it actually is more catabolic than it is anabolic. So just definitely be careful with caffeine. But honestly, if you're supersetting the crap out of everything and taking like maybe at most 60-second rest or a minute rest, you want to go until it's fairly uncomfortable, essentially. So like, I'll do 15 to 20 reps like on my triceps for like cable extensions, and then obviously I'll superset with that with a bicep like curl machine or anything like that, just really trapping blood to the muscle. If you're somebody that really wants to like notice like pretty substantial growth, I don't know if you've ever heard of occlusion training, but that works phenomenally. Like, I actually did that, I want to say a couple of years ago, and that's what honestly really helped me get the size, because it's so extremely uncomfortable, but you can actually use very lightweight with it too. And it's just about getting a ton of reps at lightweight with like slight constriction basically on your muscle belly. And so I recommend that to anybody. I actually tell people all the time that like suffer from tennis elbow or tendonitis to do that, because you're not having to work with really, really heavy weight then. I mean, people look at me all the time like I'm crazy. Sure, I can curl a lot on my cable, like on my cable machine. Oh, heck yeah. I can curl a lot, tons of tricep pushdowns at like 90 pounds, no big deal. But I will say when it comes to like dumbbells, I actually go a lot lighter. I'm just really focusing on that squeeze and contraction. And I mean, that's the trick with bodybuilding in a nutshell too. It's all about muscle mind connection. So if you are really in tune with your body and have that really good muscle mind connection, you can make lightweight feel really, really heavy depending on how many reps you do, depending on how slow you are with the movements. It's really just all about that. You don't have to sling really, really heavy weight around.
Well, you brought it up, and I'd love to bring it up as the mind to muscle connection because so many novices have no idea what people are talking about. And even though, I know I've had this explained to me 1,000 times, I'm going to pretend that I live underneath a rock because everyone explains it differently. How would you describe the mind to muscle connection to someone who's never heard it before?
So muscle mind connection, what I always like tell even my clients is I'm like, that's like really think about the muscle you're trying to work. Let's say we're doing side laterals. We're really trying to focus on that medial delt, right? So really think about that weight being basically lifted up by that segment alone and think very, very hard about it. And I'm like, it doesn't come very easy. It's going to take a minute. And what I usually do too, and what's been done to me too, is I'll actually, while I'm training, like tap that area. And what's crazy is they're like, oh, now I feel it. I'm like, exactly, because I brought attention to that area. I'm like, so when you're on your own and you're not with me, I'm like, just really focus very hard on the area that you're wanting to train or what you're wanting to grow in that exercise. Same thing goes for legs. If I'm doing um, teardrop work, for instance, I'm really focusing on that inner quad. If I'm doing outer thigh work or outer sweep, I'm really focusing on contracting and really feeling that outer sweep. It's just really focusing and thinking about what you're doing. And that's what's funny is a lot of people are like, oh, you're just a meathead. You just throw weights around. I'm like, no, it actually takes a lot more than that, too. Like, you really got to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it because a lot of the time, if you're not using your mind to connect with your muscles, basically, you're just going to be moving weight essentially. You're not going to get growth, or at least not in the right places. Like, I know a lot of people, including myself, I was guilty for this, like, probably honestly 5 years ago. I have really developed traps. I don't do shrugs. People ask me, oh, do you do a lot of shrugs? I'm like, no, I just have big traps because I never did a lot of muscle mind connection with my shoulders. So every shoulder movement I did, my traps were taking over. So
That's you're honestly the third person to ever say that too. Where yeah, if you don't train your shoulders right, the traps are one thing that really really does take off. But two of the questions before we finally wrap things up are, obviously there's so many things to this lifestyle that are good and there's so many things that are negative. But if you were given the all-knowing power, if someone were to walk up to you and said, Veronika, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the health and fitness lifestyle, and everyone would go along with it, what would be the one thing that you would like to see change?
honestly, I would like to see like this is gonna be a little bit like kind of vague, but I guess is the best way to put it. But I would like to see more realistic bodies on social media is the best way to put it. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, a lot of these people are using a crap ton of filters or they're just not promoting what fitness really is basically. I mean, sure, I'm a bodybuilder, but it doesn't mean that I'm really like this isn't like it's fitness, but it's not. Like I'm living the competitor lifestyle. This isn't the general average Joe public like health and lifestyle. So I guess the best thing to do would be like to really promote like more realistic bodies and like what it means to be health and fitness. And I mean, there are some fitness influencers out there that really do a good job promoting that and they look like very realistic. And I personally really love that. Another thing though, really quick about that too, is I also want people to know that fitness and health, it comes in all shapes and sizes. The thinnest person in the room is not necessarily the most healthiest and the heaviest person in the room might be a lot healthier than that person that appears healthy. So, health and well-being and fitness is very different per person, and that's another thing that I want that stigma to change because I've met people honestly that are like as healthy as a horse that you would never that you would look at and you're like they're not that healthy. I'm like, no, and I've been in that position too where I've been like really bulked up actually like what was it a year and a half ago, I purposely bulked up to 205 on purpose. I was very like, bless you.
No, sorry,
I
sorry.
was,
Oh, I was gonna say 205 that was my weight at 6'3" now. So it's like, yeah, so that's me basically, except I'm 6 inches taller. Yeah.
yeah. So, and that's the thing is, no, I like people look at me like, man, you were really thick and dense, but look at you now. Like you look shredded. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna tell you something. I'm like, I was still very healthy. I could go do my blood work right, like at that moment, right in that moment, blood pressure check, all that, and everything was really healthy. I was still very healthy, even though I was thicker. It doesn't matter. And so, like, that's kind of what I was preaching too. It's like, and also love your body in all forms too. That's a big thing. So
Yeah, body positivity is one thing that really needs to be more of a thing, and I support that, 100%. But lastly, now if we were to talk to you a year from today, now granted, if we were to talk a year ago and I would have asked you that question, you would have predicted a global pandemic and everything that went down, I would have bet my entire life savings against you. So it goes to show you that really we know no idea what's going to happen. I mean, we could be talking for we could be talking a year from today, and you could hear like gunshots in the background. There could be a huge fire in the background. Who knows where we're going to be at a year from now? But in an ideal world, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at in your personal training, or just your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved if we were to talk a year from today?
So a year from today, I really want to be a pro. I want to be an IFBB pro. That is my goal. I can see myself doing that. I already have a couple shows picked out. They're going to be in May next year. Fingers crossed that they don't get canceled or rescheduled. That's what I'm aiming towards. One of them is going to be in St. Louis, actually, and it's the Midwest Championship. So it's a national qualifier. I'm also doing another national qualifier in Michigan actually at the end of May. So I'm just gonna go back to back. Because for any reason in my first one I don't nationally qualify, it gives me a second chance. And regardless, it's just more stage time. It's great. And then I'll already be dieted down. And then it's gonna be obviously picking up a national or a championship show so I can go ahead and get that pro card. I mean, I'm very confident in where I'm at right now. Do I need more work? Oh yeah. I mean, all of us do. That is like the beauty of the sport. I don't even like to look at that negatively. Like a lot of people will be like, oh, like it's so unfortunate that blah blah blah. I'm like, no, it actually makes this is what makes it fun. Like if all of us were like perfect, we'd get bored. Like that's what makes it so fun and innovative is you're never going to be perfect. Like there's always something to work on and to be better at, whether it's posing, whether it's something in your physique, anything like that. So, I mean, I'm very confident that I'll get there. Now, as far as like what division, I honestly for the NPC realm, I know I'm too big for figure. I'll tell you that right now. I'm definitely going to do women's physique for NPC. I might jump into figure just for fun. Now I know I'll get marked down a little bit just because I'm again too big for NPC figure. It's really funny how that works though because we're in the IFBB realm. I'm right where figure basically is in the IFBB realm. I'm still going to be considered too small in my opinion. I could be wrong for IFBB women's physique. And so if I really want to be an IFBB women's physique, then I'm really going to have to take it up a notch. Which again, I'm not afraid of a challenge. So I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm really stoked. I'm really excited. I'm ready to get my feet wet and have some fun. So
Absolutely. And is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
well, definitely my hubby. So no, he's my number one. I mean, honestly, like my number one fan, my coach, everything like that. He honestly has given me the most results in the last year and a half that I've ever experienced with anybody. I mean, you can look at a photo from even 2 years ago to now when I right before I just started working with him, and it's crazy how much size I've put on since then. And again, like, he's definitely one of the best coaches, in my opinion, that's out there. He really listens to his clients' needs, everything like that. And he wants to see you succeed. Some coaches are just in it for the money. That's not him. So,
That's awesome. And I'll leave a link to all his stuff down below. And, everyone go and check that out. And again, Veronika, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. It is so great hearing about your story. And, everyone go and give her a follow as well. Buyer beware, though. You will get inspired to get in shape and, stop eating those Twinkies and get off the couch a little bit. But again, Veronika, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. It was a pleasure.
yeah, my pleasure anytime. I'd be more than happy to do this again, honestly. So,
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't think of a better way to end this and give everyone motivation. Can you give us a front double buy so everyone can just be, yeah. Okay, that is just, hey, hold that for a second. So that's just absolutely insane, everyone. That's everyone. We need to go and train arms now. That's just absolutely ridiculous. That's making me jealous right now and embarrassed. But again, you guys, we have Veronika. And again, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot. Have a great day, everyone.